Hello everyone and welcome to Modern Java course. One of the biggest complaints developers leverage against Java is its verbosity. This isn't as accurate as it used to be. Modern Java is far more terse than the original. Still, a lot of that verbosity is very helpful providing context to the code we're reading. Java is very much optimized for reading code. When we read, we need a setting, and the verbosity provides that. Still, sometimes that verbosity goes too far, and Lombok is here to remove common pet peeves in the Java programming language. Do you hate checked exceptions? Lombok can help. Do you hate getters and setters? It can help a lot with these. It's a fantastic tool, but it also has some pitfalls we need to discuss. In this first part, we will talk about creation and setting capabilities in Lombok. Before I proceed, as usual, the code for this and other videos in the series is available in my GitHub page, so check out this project, start it, and follow me on GitHub. Lombok performs bytecode manipulation to change several behaviors in Java, usually through annotation, and make the language arguably simpler. It works with an IDE plugin. Without such a plugin, the IDE might highlight the Java code as invalid. The best way to understand Lombok is through actual examples, so let's dive right in. This is a code we all know. It's pretty standard Java, and in a modern application would usually be replaced with a record. Indeed, for most cases, we should use records, but in a few cases, records won't work. A great example is JPA entities, which can't be records. In Lombok, we can write this exact same code like this. Notice that the fields are still private. Another class in the project can invoke setNumber, and even though the method isn't physically there, the code will compile and run as you would expect. Now, you might assume that this is a bit limiting. What if we want the setter for number to be protected? We can accomplish that by overriding the behavior for the specific method using a specific setter or getter annotation. We can also set the access level to none to block the generation of a specific setter or getter. But this is just the beginning. The fantastic thing about Lombok is its level of configuration. We can add a file called config.lombok to the root of our project. Once we do that, we can define in it many common keys and values to customize the generated bytecode. This is an example of a simple configuration file. The first entry says stop bubbling. Lombok keeps recursively looking for configuration files. This will stop that. The next entry chains the accessors. This means that every generated setter method will now return the current object. Invoking setters like this will now work. This is nice, but there are even better ways. When we set accessors to Fluent, we get a syntax that more closely resembles the one used in records with the addition of a setter method. That's pretty cool. This isn't as common, but sometimes we want to initialize a field lazily since it might be needed. The initMyObj method might be expensive, so we don't want to run it every time we cache the object. But we might never need this, so initializing the field itself might be problematic. We can accomplish the same thing using the lazy attribute for the getter annotation. It will make sure the field works as expected, and the value will be initialized only when the getter is first invoked. But this is just the beginning. we can annotate a class with ToSring to generate the ToSring method. We can use the equals and hashcode annotation to generate those methods. This seems good, but it's also somewhat problematic. The equals and hashcode methods are great for collections and related Java code, but for JPA they can be problematic. In JPA entities, you need to be careful with the implementation of these methods, as it can lead to problems. In fact, I bet that a large percentage of the problems people experience with Lombok relates to the default implementation of the equals and hashcode methods. Notice that we can use the equals and hashcode exclude annotation to block a specific field from that method. Or we can do the exact opposite and change the methods to work only with explicitly included fields and only compare against them. By default, the Lombok equals doesn't invoke the superclass equals method. We can force it to do it by setting call super to true. We can also set it as the default behavior by setting the Lombok equals and hashcode call super to call. Up until now, we didn't touch constructors, but they too are a part of Lombok. For instance, this code can be written using the noargs constructor annotation in Lombok. It also has an optional false attribute, which will initialize all the uninitialized final fields with false, 0, or null. In Spring, I often have final fields that are injected via a constructor. This is very common, but also very annoying. Every time I want to add a field, I need to edit the constructor and add that field. This code is equivalent. The final field is automatically added to the constructor, and constructor injection in Spring becomes trivial as a result. Finally, all the fields might be initialized in a constructor, which results in this mess. We can specify this with the all args constructor annotation. Typically, we would chain these declarations together so a common situation might be to include this and the no args constructor option, so both situations would be covered. Doing this is a bit of a monstrosity of annotations. There has to be a better way. The data annotation is like declaring all these 5 annotations together. Unfortunately, it isn't ideal for JPA due to the problem with equals and hashcode. Otherwise, I would always recommend it by default. Value is Lombok's version of records. If you need to target an older version of the JVM, this is pretty much like a record. It makes all the fields private and final implicitly. The class is also made final, similarly to records. It generates equals, hashcode, and all args constructor and ToSring. You can override a specific field behavior using annotations like non-final or package private. With requires an all argument constructor to work so it pairs nicely with value objects. It's designed for the common use case where we have an object instance and want to create a similar instance with the same field but change one field. In this case, we can generate a with method. That method clones the current field except for the single field, as you can see here. With 2 fields, the difference isn't great, but for larger objects, this is a helpful feature. In the next video, I'll discuss other features of Lombok. Some of them are pretty spectacular, so check it out. If you have any questions, please use the comment section. Thank you.